you. I'm going to start today by taking you back in time a little bit. So I want you to think about what you were doing in the late 90s. What was technology for you in the late 90s? Maybe you were trying to solve a Y2K problem, and you were dealing with that issue of making sure your applications were going to run when the clock turned over. Maybe you were putting up your first e-commerce sites or your first websites, and you were figuring out, how does my organization actually do application development and put applications out and do this thing called the web and put it in my data center? Maybe you were thinking about what platforms you were going to work with. Are you going to be a Java shop? Are you going to be a C++ shop? Are you going to be an ASP or a Cold Fusion shop? Or maybe you were thinking about, how do I put laptops or desktops out? Right? So those were the technologies and the issues that we were talking about back then. I was fortunate. In the late 90s, I was a CTO at a SaaS company that was helping newspapers move their content onto the web. And we started with classifieds, if anybody remembers what a classified ad is. And we went off to do content management systems, and everything that was in print in a newspaper, we went out and helped them put it out on the web. And what you could see is in the 90s, late 90s, newspapers thrived when the industry was improving, right? So there was a boom. You needed more people to hire. You put ads into the newspaper to hire people. You had some more funding, so you went and bought cars. You had to go look in the newspaper to find the dealer ads. And so during the 90s, when things were booming, they were doing fine. And then when the bust hit in 2001, some of you decided that paying $1,000 to put an ad in the newspaper just wasn't a good idea. And you started looking at other solutions. And over time, there were early disruptors between Craigslist and Cars.com and eBay. And that went off, as you know, that media and advertising went off to Facebook and Google. So I was very fortunate when I first heard about this thing called digital transformation and disruption. My first reaction was, wow, this has been happening in media for about 20 years. And for many people in media, it doesn't end well because you could see the slope of that curve. They weren't aggressive enough. They didn't innovate fast enough. They didn't disrupt themselves. They didn't get in touch with the consumer quick enough to figure out where things were going. They didn't come up with alternative businesses. They didn't think digital was going to be a new business. So that was media. And so this chart is a couple of years old now, but everybody in this room probably knows that some form of disruption from digital and digital capabilities is happening in your industries. And part of your role and part of your job and our job is to figure out how to move the organization forward faster and smarter. So this could be financial services, and it's not about blockchain. It's about the collaborative ecosystem that blockchain is going to provide. It's about the data quality that it's going to provide. It's about the efficiency it's going to provide. And it's ultimately going to be better for consumers who need to get access to capital much faster. If you're in hospitality, it's about looking at new ways to provide customer experiences because there are alternatives out there than staying at a hotel. And in healthcare, it's about becoming data-driven. How can you improve the patient experience? How can you become more efficient? I read somewhere yesterday, 25% of healthcare costs go into administrative costs. All those things are about digital disruption and using technologies to become smarter and faster. So this is your CEO, and this is your CEO without you. And the question I ask for everybody here is, what are you going to do to help them be smarter and faster and move without blindfolds on and be able to take a step forward with confidence about what they're going to do next? Now, again, I was a little bit fortunate. 10 years ago, I got called in to help a media company, an entrenched media company, go from printing magazines and having an online website to being a social aggregator. And then I went and worked for a construction company that put out data products that was really a byproduct of their print products, and I helped them become an analytics company and a data intelligence company. And then I went off and helped a financial services company that did consulting and put out papers and market research and PowerPoints and helped them become a data and analytics company. All those were transformations that needed to happen. One of the things that I realized was there's some commonality in themes, right? We're not about infrastructure anymore. The infrastructure hopefully has gotten easier. There's some new things that we need to do better and faster to be able to help our businesses compete. Okay, so I'm going to share some of those things with you because I've deployed them several times over. And the first thing is about culture. Now, we know culture eats strategy for breakfast, but you do not address IT culture by just getting up and putting a PowerPoint up there and saying, here are our new missions and here are our new values, and we need to be connected to the customer and do all these great things. I found that the way you address culture is in two very fundamental areas. First, you need a new set of practices. Okay, and you need to evolve them over time. And many of you have gotten a head start with them. You have big data, now you're becoming data-driven. You have Agile practices. You're starting to think through how to bring Agile to the cloud and through DevOps and DevSecOps, and you're thinking about innovation. So when you start thinking through business processes in IT that help collaborate with the business, that is the first step in addressing IT culture. The second part of this is to think through the actual behaviors. How do you want people in your organization behaving? What are some of the attributes that you need for them? And there's a number of them here. These are the ones that I home in on. Your business might have a few different ones, but I want them to be responsive. You know, all of you have a service desk that's not going away anytime soon. If there's a customer issue, you need to be able to be responsive to it. You need a sharing and learning organization. So how do I build something and share information around it? Disruptive times tend to be high stress times, so I want people to have fun at what they're doing, and I want them to learn the business, and that takes different flavors and different forms. But I once had my IT team learn how to sell our products, and they took the sales deck and they learned how to actually sell our own products. They weren't very good at it, but they learned how to do that. A second area of the practice, we talked about being data-driven earlier. I bet most of you, if you walked into a business meeting today, you would find many of them are still using PowerPoints and Excel to tell a story with data. Now, that's okay. At least they're looking at data, they're talking about data, but I think you need to take a step forward and introduce your business leaders to go a step further and actually start using the tools that you provide to them. So look at what the CRM is telling you about customer behaviors and what your sales team is doing. Look at your ERP and looking at the financials directly out of the systems that provide you. There's more tools today that you can add to this, but if your organization is not using the tools that you've already given them and the data that you've already provided them, then the more big data and the more data science that you put in them aren't going to take you very far. Second thing is, we know about data science programs. What I like to call citizen data science programs aims to take your business analysts and your financial people and your market research people and give them some new tools and new techniques, governance, and priorities so that they can actually self-serve their own data and build their own dashboards that are useful within their own departments. And then you could start looking at self-service capabilities, so the ability to connect to a data set, the ability to reuse a particular dashboard, and the ability to put this all together so that you can make better data decisions going forward. So that's what I call part of the data-driven organization, and it needs to start at the top by adjusting how the business is making decisions. Last panel talked a little bit about Agile. I'm sure all of you are doing Agile development in some form, whether it's a Sagile or some combination, whether it's 100% Agile or 70% Agile. This is a process that I've put in place that I think we all need to have, which is how are you going to fill your backlogs? How are you going to interface with your business leaders and understand where their mindset is going, what is coming out next, and how are you going to solution against this? This is a week-long process. It starts with getting some priorities in. They could be huge, like replacing an entire CRM system, or it could be something really small, like here's a feature I want to add, and putting it through a process where it gets solutioned week after week. It gets reviewed architecturally week after week. It provides feedback back to the business sponsor. And then once you get to a certain point where your backlog is complete, you can move on and start actually going into development. So you need a separate process that fills your backlog, that engages the business on those priorities. I've put all those best practices and many others into a book. It's something I've been working on for 10 plus years, blogging about it for the last 10, and now putting it together in a book. It's called Driving Digital. It comes out in August. I'm providing some additional tools and services around it. So if you go to drivingdigital.com/landmark, you can get a simple access to the book when it comes out, and then you can find out some more about my services. Thank you.